Welcome to the Daily Vibecasting. Today, GameStop tries to swallow eBay whole in a massive $55 billion bid. AI is officially propping up the entire U.S. economy while simultaneously threatening to hack your bank account. And the data says organic food might just be a total marketing scam.
Yeah, I mean, the hype on the timeline is just absolutely deafening today. But if we look past the, surface level noise, the second order effects of these moves are where the real collateral damage and the real money is going to be made.
I completely agree, and that is our mission for this deep dive. Today, we are taking a massive stack of sources. I mean, everything from breaking X threads by Adco BC Letter and Unusual Whales to closed-door polymarket leak reports and even 24-year Gallup polling data.
Which is a lot to get through.
It is a lot, yeah. But we're cutting through the timeline hysteria to find out what is actually real, what is just a marketing protocol, and how these massive macroeconomic shifts are going to hit your wallet, your career, and even your grocery bill.
It's a necessary exercise because, the simulation is just running hot today.
It really is. So let's start with the biggest market shockwave on the board. The timeline is completely melting down over this. GameStop is reportedly preparing to buy eBay for $125 a share.
Which is insane.
Right. That implies a 20% premium over Friday's close, putting the total valuation of the deal at a massive $55 billion market cap.
Yeah.
And both stocks surged in after-hours trading. I think eBay was up over 10%, GameStop up 5 to 8%.
I read that and immediately assumed it was a parody account.
Same.
Because when you look at the mechanics, it fundamentally breaks the traditional rules of capital allocation. I mean, GameStop's current market cap is hovering around, what, $11 to $12 billion?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So I have to ask the obvious question here. How exactly does a fish swallow a whale that is, 5 times its size?
Wait, hold on, because that was my exact first thought, too. But if you dig into the financial mechanics of what CEO Ryan Cohen is actually doing, it's wild. It feels like the modern equivalent of a reverse Pac-Man defense.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that for the listener, because that's an older corporate rating term.
Right, yeah. So a traditional Pac-Man defense in finance is when a smaller company is being targeted for a hostile takeover by a larger company. And instead of just letting it happen, the smaller company turns around and aggressively tries to buy the company that's attacking it.
They eat the ghost.
Exactly, they eat the ghost.
Yeah.
But here, GameStop isn't under attack. They are weaponizing the meme stock energy. Cohen has apparently been using GameStop's roughly $9 billion in cash reserves money. They literally crowdsourced from retail investors, pumping the stock over the last few years to quietly build a 5% stake in eBay over the last few months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he wants to leverage that stake and that cash to finance a buyout, essentially transforming GameStop from a struggling brick-and-mortar retailer into a $100 billion e-commerce leviathan focused on collectibles.
Okay, I mean, the ambition is staggering, but the cynicism in me says this is going to be an absolute nightmare to actually execute.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. For decades, legacy Wall Street firms have used complex financial leveraged buyouts, debt restructuring to acquire smaller, distressed companies. Now you have a retail darling trying to use its meme-generated war chest to mount a hostile takeover of a foundational Web 1.0 giant.
Right.
Even if Cohen leverages that $9 billion in cash with massive institutional debt to reach the $55 billion, integrating a legacy behemoth like eBay into GameStop's culture is going to be like, I don't know, trying to duct tape a rocket engine to a horse-drawn carriage.
But isn't that the point? I mean, they aren't just pumping the stock with diamond hands emojis anymore. They are buying the actual physical infrastructure of the internet. They're trying to make the meme tangible.
And that's exactly why the establishment is terrified. The meme is becoming real, tangible capital, but there's a massive ceiling to this kind of retail circus. While GameStop is throwing around billions trying to buy relevance, the real invisible capital keeping this entire market afloat right now isn't in retail or e-commerce at all.
No,
it's happening entirely in the tech sector.
Which brings us to the macroeconomic picture. So, Mark Andreessen at PMarca co-signed David Sachs on X today, and they are pointing out something that completely reframes the U.S. economy right now. AI, CapEx, meaning capital expenditures, is essentially the entire American economy.
We need to define what that actually means for the listener, though, because hyperscaler investments gets thrown around a lot in boardrooms, but it's incredibly abstract.
Yeah, let's break it down. So hyperscalers are the massive cloud providers, your Amazons, your Microsofts, your Googles.
Right.
They are currently pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into building data centers the size of small cities. They're buying up every NVIDIA chip they can find and securing the massive amounts of electricity needed to run them. And according to the data Andreessen highlighted, this specific spending spree is providing a 2.5% GDP tailwind to the United States.
Like, it's massive.
It literally is. It's driving 75% of the Q1 GDP growth. U.S. technology leadership is single-handedly sustaining our economic expansion.
It is the ultimate prop-up job. I mean, they are building the railroad tracks for the AI revolution, but here is the massive blind spot that the hyper-bulls are just completely ignoring.
Okay, what's that?
You have AI driving all this capital and GDP growth, right? The entire banking system is funding this infrastructure boom. But what happens when the thing propping up the banks decides to hack the banks?
Oh, man. The Polymarket report.
Exactly. Look at the closed-door leak that at Polymarket just dropped. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Fed Chair Jerome Powell had to hold an urgent, confidential meeting in April 2026 with the CEOs of the major banks.
Yeah.
And why? Because Anthropic's Claude Mythos AI model is now capable of autonomously identifying thousands of zero-day vulnerabilities in basic operating systems and browsers.
And just for anyone who isn't a cybersecurity expert, a zero-day vulnerability is basically a hidden, unlocked backdoor in a piece of software that even the original developers don't know exists yet.
Right, there's 0 days to fix it.
Exactly. 0 days notice to fix it before it gets exploited. So you have this super intelligent AI that can just scan millions of lines of code and find every single invisible open window into a bank's mainframe.
Which is terrifying from a systemic risk perspective. You have these open-ended, hyper-capable models analyzing legacy banking infrastructure that was, built in the 1980s and 90s.
Oh, yeah, COBOL and all that.
Yeah. The banks are practically sitting ducks. Bessent is officially warning Americans that AI could systematically drain bank accounts. I mean, the irony is just suffocating. The very technology generating the wealth of the U.S. economy is identifying the exact vulnerabilities needed to steal it.
I have to say, though, the dark humor on X right now is incredible. Half the timeline is just people joking that their checking accounts are too empty to hack. Anyway, I saw one post that said, go ahead, Claude, take my $14. You need it more than I do.
Yeah, it's a funny coping mechanism. But make no mistake, the regulatory hammer that is going to come down because of this will be unprecedented.
But here is where I get conflicted. When you look at the macro risks, it's terrifying. But when you zoom in on the micro utility, like what these models can actually do for you, the individual listening to this right now, you instantly see why this boom is completely unstoppable.
Right, the personal leverage.
Yes. The productivity gains are just too massive to ban. For example, there's a viral thread from at Roundtable Space right now that just blew my mind. It's a 9-step weekend guide to creating an AI voice clone.
Oh, I saw this. The workflow uses Claude, Whisperflow, and co-work mode.
Wait, hold on, because I actually tried to follow that thread and I was a bit confused by the workflow. Are you telling me I just talk into my phone and it automatically formats my scattered thoughts into a cohesive personality clone?
Pretty much, yeah. The mechanics of it are brilliant in their simplicity. You basically run a series of self-interview prompts. You just talk out loud about your views on the world, your career, your hobbies, and then you use an app called Whisperflow to convert that audio into text with incredibly high fidelity. Then you compress that massive block of text into a markdown file, which is basically just a very clean, stripped-down text format that AI reads easily using co-work mode.
Right.
You feed that specific file into Claude's extended thinking mode, and suddenly the machine writes exactly like you. It mimics your cadence, your vocabulary, your humor. You can even port that same file over to ChatGPT or Gemini to keep your digital voice consistent across every single platform.
That is wild. And right next to that on the timeline, you have at Peter Steinberger dropping Claw Sweepers 0.2.0. If you are a software developer listening to this, it's going to change your life. It's an OpenClaw bot running on Codex that automates the entire open source maintenance loop.
And the maintenance loop is, frankly, the most grueling part of software engineering.
Exactly. It's the digital plumbing.
Yeah.
Usually a developer has to detect an issue, write a patch, submit a pull request, which is basically handing in a rough draft of a code change, and then another human has to manually review it, test it, and merge it.
It's tedious.
So tedious.
Oh.
But Claw Sweeper automates all of that. Issue detection, pull request, review, repair, auto-merging. It acts as an autonomous digital middle manager. OpenAI is even giving free accounts to open source maintainers just to run this stuff.
Which fundamentally changes the labor equation. I mean, the bottleneck for human developers used to be the manual labor of reviewing code. Now the machine does the manual labor, and you just oversee the overarching architecture.
Okay, so pushback here. If AI is doing the coding for us, and we are using WhisperFlow to clone our voices to do our writing for us, aren't we just outsourcing all of the actual doing so we can focus exclusively on the thinking?
In theory, yes. But here is the massive trap in that philosophy. Doing is what generates data. And in the modern economy, data is the only real competitive moat left. Software is rapidly becoming a commodity. If you or I can clone a voice or write an app over the weekend using a free bot, the value of digital abstraction drops to zero. That's why the smartest capital isn't fighting the software wars in the cloud anymore.
They're going physical.
Exactly. They know there's a ceiling to synthetic, computer-generated data. To survive, companies have to jump from the digital world into the physical one to harvest real-world data, physical AI.
Which perfectly explains why the Tesla data drop today is so monumental. Sawyer Merritt at Sawyer Merritt and the official Tesla account both posted that full self-driving FSD supervised has officially crossed 10 billion miles driven globally.
10 billion
miles.
Let's put that scale into perspective, because human brains just aren't wired to understand compounding data at this level. Think about how a neural net learns. It doesn't learn from you driving perfectly straight on a sunny highway. It learns from edge cases.
Like what?
Like a deer jumping out from behind a parked ice cream truck during a blizzard in a school zone. You cannot perfectly simulate that in a cloud server. You have to experience it in physical reality. And right now, Tesla owners are collectively driving 1,000 FSD miles every 3 seconds.
Wow.
That is 28.8 million miles of real-world edge case physical data being fed back into their AI every single day.
1,000 miles every 3 seconds. That is absurd.
It's an insurmountable data moat. Every other startup trying to build autonomous vehicles or physical robotics is playing in a digital sandbox compared to that. Tesla is experiencing physical reality 28 million miles a day. And as they accumulate that tangible data, they pull infinitely further away from anyone relying purely on synthetic software data.
And I think that transition, like the demand for physical data, the reality of the road, is triggering something deep in our culture right now. Think about your own life. As our driving, our writing, and our coding all become fully automated, human beings are experiencing this profound psychological whiplash.
Absolutely. The more invisible and abstract the technology gets, the more desperate people become for things they can actually touch, feel, and verify.
Yeah, there is this massive craving for the tangible on the timeline today. Brian Roelle, at Brian Roelle, shared this incredible 1950s archival footage. It's the Eicher Tractor Company at a farm fair.
I love this video.
It's so good. Back then, they couldn't just drop a fancy PDF spec sheet to prove their tractor was reliable. To prove the engine's oil pressure worked under extreme conditions, they built this massive vertical track and literally drove the tractor in full vertical loop-de-loops. Just flipping a giant piece of cast iron farm machinery upside down in front of a live crowd.
Because, in the 1950s, you couldn't just throw up a landing page with a bunch of buzzwords and venture capital backing. You had to show the farmer in person that the carburetor wouldn't flood when it was inverted.
Right.
It is the ultimate proof of work. People today are exhausted by vaporware. They are tired of subscription models and software updates that break their devices. They want the 1950s tractor equivalent of proof.
Which is exactly why Paul Graham, at Paul Graham, was going viral today praising 1950s Omega automatic watches, specifically the Seamaster calendars. He called them accurate, cheap, and very pleasing.
Yeah.
He essentially said it's the safest bet if you want an old watch that will actually make you happy. It's this deep, almost romantic nostalgia for an era when things are just mechanically sound. They did exactly what they promised to do.
It's an immune response to the digital age. We are surrounded by marketing protocols that overpromise and underdeliver. And that desire to escape marketing vaporware and tech is now bleeding into how we view everything, including what we put in our bodies.
Which brings us to the ultimate takedown of modern marketing we saw today. The tech podcast, TBPN, at TBPN, posted a fascinating excerpt from Brian Johnson's Blueprint Protocol.
Oh, this was ruthless.
It really was. Johnson, who tracks literally every biomarker in his body, essentially drops a nuke on the entire grocery industry. His data-driven baseline assumption is that organic food actually performs worse than non-organic food on many key health variables.
And he uses a brilliant analogy for this. He calls it the junkyard dog theory.
Okay, you have to explain the junkyard dog theory, because when I first heard that, I couldn't figure out what a junkyard dog has to do with an organic apple.
Well, think of a junkyard dog. It looks incredibly mean, it barks loudly, and it makes the owner of the junkyard feel incredibly safe from intruders. But if you actually examine the dog, it might be malnourished, riddled with parasites, and genetically weak. The organic label is the junkyard dog of the supermarket. It creates a completely false sense of security.
So it's just a feeling, not a biological reality.
Exactly. It's a worthless marketing protocol. A sticker that says organic simply tells you that the farm adhered to a specific, outdated checklist regarding certain synthetic pesticides, but it tells you absolutely nothing about the actual nutritional density of the crop, the heavy metal content in the soil, or the biological value to human cells.
That's crazy to think about.
It is. Consumers are willingly paying a massive premium at the register because a sticker makes them feel safe. Meanwhile, the actual objective data shows that a genetically modified, non-organic variant, which was specifically engineered for maximum vitamin retention and grown in nutrient-dense, controlled soil, might be fundamentally healthier for human biology. People are paying for the brand, not the outcome. It's the exact same psychological trap as buying tech vaporware.
That is a complete reevaluation of assumptions. I mean, next time you're at the grocery store, you're going to look at that organic aisle completely differently. And what's fascinating is that we are seeing this exact same ruthless reevaluation hit deeply personal life paths too.
How so?
Well, people are starting to look at the accepted narrative of modern life and say, wait, is this actually true, or is this just another marketing protocol? Look at Blake Skoll at Plest, the CEO of Boone Supersonic.
And for context, building a company that manufactures supersonic jets is arguably one of the most capital-intensive, high-stress, all-consuming endeavors a human being could possibly attempt.
Right. And he posts today pushing back incredibly hard on the modern cultural narrative that having kids ruins your career or that you have to choose between ambition and family. He shared that he founded his aerospace company with 3 kids under 24 months old, and he didn't even have a supportive partner at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. He bluntly stated that kids are a joy, not a burden, and that you absolutely can have an ambitious career and a vibrant family. It was a direct, unapologetic shot at this rising anti-child, dual-income, no-kids messaging we see constantly pushed online.
What you are seeing there is a fraction of the cultural consensus. For a long time, there was a single mainstream conveyor belt of how you were supposed to live, what you were supposed to eat, and what you're supposed to value. Now, because of the hyper-connected nature of the internet, people have access to all the data, and they are realizing they can choose their own reality. But the massive second-order effect of that freedom is an incredibly severe ideological divergence, especially among the younger generation.
Which leads us directly to the data that Wilfred Riley at Wildebeest 630 posted today. And we need to look at this purely objectively, just reading the numbers, because they are staggering. He shared Gallup poll data tracking the political ideology of young people aged 18 to 29. The data runs from 1999 all the way up to 2023. Over that 24-year period, young men shifted exactly 1 point more conservative, basically a flat line, completely neutral.
But the shift in young women over that same exact time period is historically unprecedented.
It's massive. According to the Gallup data, young women moved 23 points more liberal on net ideology. So you have a gender divide that used to be roughly 12 points in the late 90s, now gaping to a 23-point chasm. The timeline was completely flooded with sociological explanations for this today. Some people are pointing to the divergent experiences in modern university systems, while others are pointing to the way algorithm-driven social media creates completely siloed echo chambers.
It raises a profound question about the architecture of our digital spaces. When algorithms are purely optimized for engagement, they naturally push users toward content that validates their existing priors.
Right, the filter bubble.
Exactly. If a young man and a young woman open the exact same social media app while sitting on the exact same couch, they are being fed completely different realities, different cultural heroes, and different societal grievances. We're watching the real-time, second-order effects of the algorithmic sorting of humanity. They aren't just consuming different media, they're beginning to inhabit entirely different philosophical universes.
It really is a profound sociological shift, and it brings us full circle on the sheer whiplash of today's deep dive. We started with GameStop trying to use retail meme liquidity to execute a $55 billion reverse Pac-Man on eBay. We looked at AI literally carrying the weight of the U.S. GDP on its back. while polymarket leaks show it simultaneously plotting to hack the legacy banking system.
It's a lot to process.
It is. And then we saw this desperate cultural retreat to the tangible from 1950s loop-de-loop tractors and analog Omega watches to tearing down the organic food myth with cold, hard biological data.
It is a highly chaotic environment, but the through line connecting all of this is clear. Whether you are looking at capital markets, software development, or cultural trends, the premium right now is on reality.
Yeah.
People are tired of the simulation. They want the raw data. They want the physical proof. And they are ruthlessly abandoning systems, whether it's legacy code or lifestyle narratives that don't deliver actual results.
So synthesizing all of this data, what is your prediction for how this plays out tomorrow? Where does the collateral damage hit first?
Well, watch the regulators. A $12 billion meme stock trying to buy a $55 billion legacy tech giant is going to trigger massive SEC scrutiny. I predict they will try to block the GameStop and eBay deal purely on the grounds of market stability, not antitrust. And as for AI, don't be surprised if the next major push for AI regulation isn't framed around protecting consumer safety or preventing deepfakes, but is framed entirely around protecting the banking sector from zero-day exploits. Capital protects capital.
Capital protects capital. That makes total sense. But here's something provocative to chew on before we see you tomorrow. If AI does successfully automate all of our digital labor, our coding, our writing, our data analysis, and we all psychologically retreat back to tangible things like 1950s tractors, analog watches, and growing our own families, are we just going to end up using artificial superintelligence to fund a global return to the 19th century lifestyle? Something to think about as you scroll tonight. The only defense in this environment is demanding the underlying data. Thank you for joining us in the deep end, and we will catch you tomorrow for the next Vibe Check.